We're going to begin that first detour I mentioned to discuss and hopefully flesh out what that term Hebrew and a couple of other terms used to describe something about the family line of descendants of Abraham, which continued on through his son Isaac, meant to people of the biblical era, and in the process discover why and how we find these three different terms used in the scriptures at different times in history for various situations. Okay. They are by no means synonymous, nor did their meaning remain the same over the centuries, even though the most standard Bible versions tend to treat those three terms as if they were essentially parallel and interchangeable at all times. That's just incorrect. Okay, two of those three terms are Hebrew and Israelite. The third term is usually said by Jewish and Christian scholars to be Jew. This third term is a bit more problematic and complex to deal with than the first two. Therefore, I'm going to start by first dealing with the term that Jonah described himself as a Hebrew, confronting it as it was used in the early days of the Bible, that is long before the New Testament era. Now, in the ancient use of the Hebrew language, the word is Ivri. Ivri. And it is derived from an older Semitic word that means to cross over. It refers to a well-known group of people led by Abraham who formerly resided in Eber. However, they crossed over, they migrated across the Euphrates River to a land on the other side of it. Eber was a known term, meaning the general region on the northern and eastern side of the Euphrates River. And the reason they referred to that land as Eber is because it was named for their famous ancestor, Eber, who, as listed in the Bible list of generations, was 14 generations removed from Adam, 7 generations removed from Enoch. So even if the people of that era didn't really fully know the complete story of Abraham and all of its spiritual and religious implications, they were aware enough to know that historically speaking, a famous man leading some people who crossed over the Euphrates River to the south and to the west went on to become an entirely new, large, and influential ethnic group called the Ivri, Hebrews. They also knew that Hebrews were separate enough and culturally distinct enough from all the other world's ethnicities to be seen as unique among humanity in general, and therefore they weren't all that well understood. Now, I want to say this another way. In that era, the easiest and surest way for an Israelite like Jonah to explain his identity to a foreigner was to label himself a Hebrew, an Ivri. It is similar to the way a citizen of the USA who is visiting a foreign country might explain his identity. He would likely use the very broad term American, okay, which nearly everyone on our planet would understand. No further information is needed. Okay. A second term now, Israelite. This refers to a person that is descended from the family of a man named Jacob. The biblical Hebrew term for Israelite is Bnei Israel. While it literally means son or child of Israel, what it meant in that era was that this person belongs to the identifiable nation of Israel. So while the Hebrew explains about a person's original ethnicity, separate and distinct from all other ethnicities, the term Israelite speaks of which identifiable nation, a geographical place, a political entity that a person knows their allegiance to. Now for the problematic third term, Jew. This is a bit confusing, but it's important, especially for good, serious Bible students to study and for proper doctrine so that we can untangle it. Now, biblically, the Hebrew language terms that are nearly always translated into English as Jew are Yehud or Yehudi. Now, initially, it referred to a person who was an actual member of the specific tribe of Judah, the tribe of Judah. It was based purely on a tribal affiliation, the tribe which sprang from the third son of Jacob. Over time, the meaning evolved. After Israel entered the Promised Land, it evolved slightly to include living in a particular geographical territory that the members of the tribe of Judah occupied there. So we have a progression in the Bible of what that word meant based on which time in biblical history that we're exploring. Put it another way. At first, Judah was simply the name of an individual. This was Jacob's third son. Once Judah's own family grew large enough to become its own tribe, which took many generations to grow to that size, then the term Judah came to refer to his extended family, a specific tribe, the tribe of Judah. However, once the tribe of Judah migrated and it entered into the Promised Land, and then it was assigned its own territory, the term more referred to that specific territory. But it also included the identity of the people who counted themselves as residents of that territory of Judah. Later still, after David's and then King Solomon's death in the 10th century BC, Judah went from being a tribal territory to become its own full-fledged, sovereign, and recognized nation with its own king. At that point, the meaning of the Hebrew terms Yehud and Yehudi evolved into indicating a particular nationality called Judah or Judahite in English. A long time after that, after the northern kingdom of Israel was exiled from their own national territory by Syria, and later after Judah's exile to Babylon, and then later still after their return to their former territory, the terms Yehud and Yehudi were used to describe the returned exiles and all who accompanied them. And we know that some of the exiles of the Assyrian conquest, some from that group we call the 10 lost tribes of Israel, joined those coming home from Babylon. The English words adopted to identify this group, still called Yehud or Yehudi in Hebrew, was Jew. More time passed, and the terms Yehud and Yehudi further evolved to more refer to the particular religion that was practiced and had less to do with exactly where those folks were located. Again, the word chosen by most English translators just remained Jew. Now, I realize that none of this might matter to a casual Bible reader, but for you serious students of God's Word, these differences are a significant ingredient to properly understand what we're being told. I mean, it truly matters. So a few decades now, after the 70 AD destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, the era of the rabbis, and along with it, the term Jew acquired an even broader meaning as generally anyone who followed a religion that was now more formally known as Judaism. Today, in the 21st century, after nearly 2 millennia of adding new traditions and customs and of Jewish people migrating to every part of this planet, even the rabbis can't agree on exactly what a Jew is or how to define the term. Must it include a genetic attachment to Jacob? If so, how could that ever be proved? Does it only refer to a practicing member of their religion, Judaism? Might it be a person whose family history shows that some of them practiced Judaism, regardless of their own ethnic background? That is, no genetic tie at all. Jacob was needed. Does one have to even believe in the God of Israel to be considered a Jew? In modern times, the answer is a firm no. Of course, that depends on which rabbi you might talk to. So in our day, the term Jew is very flexible and it's hazy. Something that mostly indicates some level of identity with, some claim of allegiance to a group of people that historically practiced some level of Jewish traditions and laws that began with the return of the exiles from Babylon. Therefore, there has been a pretty contentious ongoing debate among Jewish leaderships in modern Israel as to what to call and how to consider these exiles of the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom of ancient Israel, something that's completely separate from the Babylonian conquest of the southern kingdom of Judah, who are now coming home to Israel in ever increasing numbers. Many of the folks, they don't want to be called Jews, primarily because they see the term in its ancient sense, as meaning a combination as a member of the tribe of Judah, which they certainly are not, along with the religion they uniquely practice called Judaism. Rather, many of these returning exiles of the so-called 10 lost tribes have practiced and intend to continue to practice a somewhat different set of faith traditions that they see as the truer and the older religion that is called for by the same Hebrew scriptures that adherents of Judaism claim to follow. Complicated, isn't it? But this is the reality. And if we don't understand all this, then we completely misconstrue what we read in the Bible about Abraham's descendants. So here's the thing for us to grasp today. At no time in the Bible, Old or New Testaments, did the term Jew mean what it means today. At no time. It's an anachronistic term. That means that while we use it today, we should not read it back into the Bible because it wasn't in use back then. Rather, when in Hebrew or in its Greek equivalent, the term Yehud or Yehudi mostly referred to the residents of the territory belonging to the tribe of Judah. Once we get to the Roman era, in other words, this is the time of the New Testament, the Greek language became dominant, and the term Ioedos was used because of the spread of the Greek language as the preferred language throughout the Roman Empire. Therefore, we find the Greek word Ioedos in the New Testament as a replacement for the Hebrew Yehud or Yehudi. Now, depending on the biblical context in which it is used, Ioedos meant either a person who followed the religion that the people of Judah did, or it meant a person who was the resident of a Roman province called Judea. When we read the New Testament, we find that those folks claiming family ties to Jacob who live in Judea call themselves Judeans to distinguish themselves from other descendants of Jacob, other Israelites who lived in other places than Judea. For example, folks descended from Jacob who lived in the Roman province of the Galilee, like Yeshua, like all of his disciples, guess what they called themselves? Galileans. Other descendants of Jacob who lived in faraway places in the vast Roman Empire, but had next to no connection to the Holy Land, simply because of the great distance from it that they lived, yet still they identified themselves to some level to the Israelites living in the Holy Land. Well, they were also called Ioedos. So here's the thing we need to understand when reading the New Testament. Ioedos was a very general, catch-all Greek term for all these various folks that saw themselves as a member of a distinct Hebrew heritage, culture, and religion apart from other people on this planet. Now, it's challenging, as I know this is, to visualize. The reality is that languages have always evolved. And by the way, this includes English. And circumstances and history, that's also evolved. And so labels for people, labels for ethnicities did the same as concerning their meaning. As concerns the use of our three biblical terms, Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew, we do not have any significant confusion in the Old Testament, except that caused by agenda-driven reasons for using English words that do not accurately reflect the real meaning of those Hebrew words at that time. The confusion exists mainly in our New Testament. Should we encounter the English word Jew in the Old Testament, it's a poor translation that ought to just be thrown out and replaced in English by the word Judean nearly every time.